Welcome to Business Talk Sister Gawk. I'm Becca.
And I'm Ruthie.
And today's episode is part 2 of how to start a videography business. With us, we have Noah. If you didn't hear our first episode, you need to go back and at least listen to the Gawk portion with Noah because that was great. Okay, so I have some questions for you. We already went through what do you do, why do you do it, and we kind of started getting a little bit into how do you do it. But I have some more questions for you on that. So
all right.
How would you describe your regular day? How do you do what you do?
That's a good question. I think a lot of days are different depending on the time of year, honestly. For example, right now, I'm mostly I'm emailing and like doing phone calls quite a bit with clients for next year for weddings. So the off season of weddings is mostly like booking and just like getting details straightened out and answering a lot of, people have a lot of questions about how I can fit into their plans and, that sort of thing. So right now it's just a lot of communicating and sending out contracts and that sort of thing. In the summer, it's a lot more just hands-on shooting, editing, a lot of driving, honestly, and just sort of in the grind of, wedding video workflow, I guess. But
living off of Red Bull.
Exactly, yes. That's a year-round thing now.
So when you meet with people, do they choose you based on like your personality a lot of times when you meet with them and say, this is what I can do? Or is it more based on the work that you've previously done?
That's a good question. So a lot of times, honestly, I rarely meet with people initially. So when they book me, it's entirely based around, initially at least, around portfolio. So it's a lot of emails and, once in a while, if people are in the area of, in Duluth here, I'll meet with them. But a lot of people are booking me, they live out of state, or, they're down in the cities. And so it's pretty hard to get like an initial consultation meeting or whatever. I don't even know what you call that, but so it's they basically just see my portfolio and say, hey, that looks like something that we're looking for, and so they contact me.
All right. What do you think would be an advantage of having a second shooter? I know it's kind of, you do things a lot pretty solo for now, but do you think that you would ever expand to doing that if you saw the value in it?
For sure. It's something I think about more and more, actually. So I've never had a second shooter on a wedding shoot, for sure. It would be helpful in a lot of ways. In terms of weddings, it'd be helpful to just get different angles of something that's happening. So, for example, a lot of couples do like a first look at sort of, midday or something. It's the first time they see each other. So, it's kind of a cool moment. I always really like it because it's either usually really sweet or sometimes it's just really funny. And, people's personalities just sort of come out during these first looks. So, but the problem with having one camera and one lens is like usually you get one person's reaction to things and you don't see both their faces. So that's one area where having a second shooter would be kind of nice. It's just like moments like that where things, are happening in real time and, you can only capture so much from one angle. But on the flip side, more cameras is, in my opinion, it's more pressure. If I'm there, there's probably a photographer there. The photographer a lot of times does have a second shooter already. So on a wedding day, it's like, if people really want 4 cameras, potentially on them at all times, it seems kind of excessive. So, so in a lot of spaces, you know, it's just like tight spaces too. If you're indoors or whatever, it's just like, it wouldn't really make sense to have a second shooter in a lot of environments, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So what would be some of the kind of base level equipment that you would need to have starting out? And then now when you're looking back at when you first started, thinking about like, I can't believe how I survived without this. So like starting out and then looking back now, like I can't live without this.
Sure. Yeah, video is, it definitely is a little bit more gear based than just still photos would be. So there are some things when you're making videos that you do need that you wouldn't really think about otherwise. So luckily, in terms of video cameras, like the last 10 years or so has been insane with video technology. I mean, you just look at the kind of videos you get with your cell phone now, and it's just insane, the amount of processing that they can put into small packages. So luckily the cameras that you would need really aren't that expensive. I think I shot my first 25 weddings or so, like the first year of weddings, I shot on like a $400 camera, maybe $500. Really wasn't that expensive. So the camera's not really that expensive. You probably need, at minimum, you probably need like a wide angle lens and sort of a more like telephoto lens. So camera, 2 or 3 lenses. You need some audio equipment too, which is kind of a whole separate thing. It's like a lot of people don't think about is the amount of cables and like recorders and microphones that you'll need to just like record stuff. Other than that, you do need a really nice computer, which starting out, that's probably the biggest expense that you'll have is a computer, either whether it's a laptop or a desktop that's will be able to handle like high quality videos. But I'd say when I started out, I probably had in total maybe like 2,000 invested in all of my equipment. That includes a computer as well. So that's, I mean, extremely low in my opinion. So you can get going for pretty cheap. And then as you start learning like what the limitations are of sort of, you know, less expensive cameras and less expensive lenses and that sort of thing, you kind of realize what needs to get upgraded and what will actually help versus just end up costing money and not really help that much.
So how often do you upgrade equipment?
It's honestly, it's kind of a continual process, which is if you talk to any photographer about it, they'll kind of probably laugh about that question too, because it's sort of the curse of, you know, acquiring gear all the time. Is like there's always going to be something that sparks your interest, or you know, they come out with a new version of a lens or whatever. I myself just basically replaced everything that I own over this last winter and upgraded all of my camera, all my lenses and everything. I switched over to Sony, if that means anything to anyone. But so honestly, it's kind of a continual thing of like finding the right balance between things. But luckily, like cameras and lenses, they have a pretty good resale value. So, you know, it might seem like, yeah, I just dropped like whatever 7,000 on new gear, but I'm going to sell a lot of this other stuff that is going to make up for that.
So tell us about intellectual property and what do you know about using that, like other artist stuff for like audio and those kind of things? How does that factor into how you put a video compilation together in your editing phase?
Yeah, that's a great question actually, because the audio side of things is a lot trickier than I think a lot of people realize because of copyrights. So you know, a lot of people reach out to me and they'll ask for wedding video, but they say, hey, we'd like this, I don't know, Garth Brooks song or whatever in it. And I have to sort of explain to them like, hey, actually, if you want to use that song, if you want to pay me to make a video using that song, I have to go out and get a license for it. And the license to that song is, if it's a really popular song, it's probably going to cost like $20,000-$30,000 or something like that. So it's probably not something we're able to do. And so, yeah, that piece I sort of have to navigate with people sometimes. So I do pay for licensing for, that's one of my biggest business expenses actually, is paying for music licensing for wedding videos. And so, it's sort of like the more you end up paying, the higher quality music you get access to. So that's one thing that I take a little bit of pride in is, being a musician, I'm sort of a little bit pickier about music. And so I would like to think that the music I pick really represents a couple well, and also sort of, fits the sort of 218 Visuals brand well, I guess. But yeah, I'd say audio copyrights is the biggest thing where I run into that. And I've even had some cases where I've purchased a license for a song. I can think of one example is I bought a license to use the Hillsong's Oceans in a wedding video. And as soon as I posted it, Facebook and Instagram took it down immediately. So they wouldn't even let me post it. And I had to sort of file a claim that said, well, hey, actually, I do have, I have a written license from, the Hillsong. I forget who their publishing company is. So yeah, it's sort of a messy world. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, if you use music that you don't have rights to, it probably just get removed entirely, which is kind of a bummer, but yeah.
So what are some good tools for finding songs that you use?
Yeah, so because it's such a common problem, luckily there are websites that will sort of tailor their music selection to filmmakers and videographers. So for example, the main one that I use is called MusicBed, and they're this giant catalog of music, mostly unknown artists that you wouldn't see on the radio, definitely. Although there are some, for example, that's where I got the license to Oceans, and they have stuff like Ben Rector's on there and that sort of thing. But for the most part, it's people that are maybe on Spotify, but that you hadn't heard before, which for me, I think that's great, especially for wedding videos. I don't know if people really want their wedding day attached to a Taylor Swift song or something. I think initially that probably seems like a good idea, but I think you want a little bit more of a personal or unique touch to the music. So there's tons of great resources like MusicBed, Soundstripe is another one, Artlist. There's probably a solid half dozen or dozen really solid websites that you can pay to have access to.
Nice.
I'm just saying right now, I strongly regret not having a Taylor Swift song for my wedding soundtrack. I'm just kidding.
Maybe we can strike that from the record. I don't know.
Lifelong regret of Becca's.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into some of the more technical financial pieces. Tell me about traveling and gas and how you work that into your cost that you bill out to a client.
Yeah, so for weddings and just other video projects that are out of town, definitely charge for travel. So I don't know if that's a suggestion or whatever, but you definitely should be charging if you're taking your time to drive somewhere and bring all your gear in a car and gas and all that stuff. So I think about it in terms of how many hours is it away from me. So I don't know if I have an exact cutoff for like when I'll charge for a hotel room exactly. That sort of depends on like I don't know. I guess maybe I'd say the number in my head right now is like if it's more than 3 hours away from my house, like I'm probably going to charge, another however much like a hotel room is in the area. If it's something that's going to keep me there late, like a wedding, for example, or if it's like a 2-day project or something. But I don't really. That's sort of like a flat rate too. So I don't really charge like the exact number of miles, for example, sort of a flat travel fee that goes up, for every hour or so that it is away from me. And I'm sure there's different and maybe better ways of doing that, but in general, I try to keep the business side of things as simplified as I can because I am more of like a, I don't know, scatterbrained, creative minded sort of videographer rather than like a really business oriented one. So yeah, if I'm just being honest, that's probably where I land. So
That's pretty much most creative people in general with business. So, how do you
yeah,
when you package your video files, do you include like the B-roll in that too, or is that extra? How do you bring your final product to people?
yeah. So I don't really normally give people like the raw footage of like everything that I shot that day, if that's what you're asking. Some people have asked for that, and I'm usually able to talk them out of it. It's sort of it gets into a lot of like technical stuff with like video codecs and color spaces and all this stuff. But the reality is like even if I gave you all this stuff, number one, your computer wouldn't even be able to play it. Like my computer can't even play the videos that I shoot unless I import them first into Adobe Premiere. So um, so the raw footage for most people is completely useless. So I'm usually able to be like, well, you're probably not going to use it anyways. So I don't give people everything, but I do give quite a bit of like I don't know if you call it material, at least for a wedding day. So there's the highlights video that is sort of it's the really cool cinematic thing with background music and all the fun cool shots of the day. It's all the stuff that's I advertise on my Instagram and it's on my website and stuff. But other than that, separately, I send recordings of things. So by that, I mean like a full recording of the ceremony, of the speeches, of the first dances of the day that happen, and then there's some other like little, if you call them like vignettes or whatever, just like little moments of the day that I send to. So I send most of that just privately to people because I don't think a lot of people want their you know best man's wedding toast or whatever just public on YouTube or like their wedding ceremony vows. Like a lot of people want that kind of more private. So um, that is just sort of at their discretion if they want to share that, but I keep that private on my end at least. So there's been some really funny speeches though that like it's like I don't even know these people, and I'm just like crying laughing. Like that's like such a hidden surprise when someone's just like hilarious. It's just like, oh man, this is great. I'm like being entertained and I'm getting paid right now.
There you go.
In terms of like delivery, it's all online. So I don't do any sort of DVDs or I used to offer like a USB option, and if someone was really intent on that, I would do it for them. But people can just download them and put them on their own USB drive. So it's just not something I care to do for people, honestly, because it just doesn't make sense. So
Okay, so when you first started out, how did you kind of overcome the insecurity of doing something new and stepping out?
yeah. So I think you just have to accept the fact that you're just gonna suck for a while, and that's what I say a lot with people about music too. Like, because I'm a guitarist, and so a lot of people ask me for guitar tips or whatever. I'm just like, honestly, you just have to learn to just suck. Like you're just not gonna be good at it for the first whatever. But it's the process of like sort of powering through that, and the desire to like get better and improve and compare your work to other people, and just it's you just have to go through that to get better at things. I think that applies to video, it applies to music, and I think it just applies to anything new that you try out. Like obviously the first time you do something is not going to be as good as, you know, when you've mastered something. So
Like
I think
watching
you
the
just
first episode of any show ever.
right, yeah, the characters aren't developed, it's a little awkward, you know, but then like, you know, you get to season 3 and it's like we're rolling, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
So
just go for it, I'd say. Yeah.
looking back, what are things that you would tell yourself to do differently, or what advice would you give to someone who's looking to start out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I think some advice that I would give to someone just starting out, and that I would have told myself, you know, 3 years ago, would just be to be more confident in your abilities to do something. So, you know, when you're starting out in video, like it is like honestly, especially a wedding, like you feel a lot of pressure. You know, I don't really feel that way anymore because I've done, you know, close to 100 weddings now. But when you start out, you feel so much pressure, and that sort of, at least for me, I think caused me to like shrink in some scenarios. So I didn't want to ask people to like redo something, or, you know, I didn't want to be like in the way of the wedding. So, you know, I think I sacrificed some really cool shots where I could have been closer, but I just didn't want to block people's view and that sort of thing. I think just be confident in what you're doing, and just, you know, realize that like they hired you to be the guy or the girl at this, you know, if it's not a wedding, it's like a video shoot or like a commercial shoot or whatever. Just to like own that role of being in charge of making this video. So that's something that I think I definitely grew into, but at the start, I was definitely a little bit more passive, I would say, in like making the videos and like directing things. So that's one thing, some advice that I'd give to someone just starting out is, yeah, definitely just own the role of creating the video.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, this has been so good getting to kind of pick your brain and learn about what you do, and how other people can do that too. So thank you, Noah, for joining us. He's from
Yeah.
218 Visuals, which you can follow him on Instagram. Do you want to say your website URL?
Yeah. I hope what I said was useful. So my Instagram is at 218 Visuals, and the website's the same. It's just 218visuals.com. So that's me.
Nice. Cool. We are going to transition into our sister Gawk portion, and Becca has a story that she's been very excited to tell us. So she's going to go ahead and give her spiel.
Okay. Well, this actually, it just came to me when we were talking about this, because when we first started getting together to do this recording, Noah's like, "Oh, so how do you guys know each other?" And Ruthie hadn't joined the meeting
God.
yet, and I was just like, "Oh, we really don't know anything about one another because he doesn't know we're related." And it just like made me think of this one time, Noah. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you. One time I was a camp counselor, and I had been paired with a cabin buddy that was like kind of new to me. Like I'd never known this person before, but apparently like other people knew him because he had worked there in the past or whatever, but he was just like visiting. And I was like, I'm gonna pretend to know this guy and like just totally mess with him. And so I went around and like asked everybody, "Hey, do you know this guy? He's going to be my cabin buddy. What do you know about him?" And so I started gathering all of these facts about his life. And then
God.
this This is terrible. I
She
know.
wrote his autobiography. That's the
No,
the
I
ending
did
of the
not.
story.
So then like the first time, like where after like everything's done, you're supposed to meet up with your cabin buddy and your cabin's supposed to like meet them for the first time. And I'm like with 7th and 8th grade girls, and I'm like, and this is our cabin buddy. And he's so awesome because you might not know this, but the first time he ever wrote a bull, he wrote it for the full 8 seconds.
Yo.
And he's like, who are you? And I just like introduced him like we had known each other for forever. And the whole time I'm just talking to him like we've been best friends. and then like he left and he started like going up to people, and other people knew I was like pranking him. So like he went and started asking people like, hey, like, do you know Becca? Like, how would I know her? How have we been like, have we worked together in the past?
And Becca, so for me, I'm very much instant gratification. Once it's funny, it's
Oh,
funny,
no.
and then you're done.
no.
Becca is like in it for the long haul. So this went
3
on for
days.
like
3
yeah.
days.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
actually
like,
amazing. That's
like
hilarious.
I legitimately like for breakfast one day he was like gonna meet us to get breakfast with our cabin, and I like got this bowl of like Lucky Charms and I brought it to him. I'm like, I know these are your favorite, and like just weird stuff. And I will not ever forget his face as he stood there holding the Lucky Charms and like slowly putting them into his mouth like they were poisoned. Like, how do I know you? It was so good. I finally let it go after 3 days because I actually did want to be his friend.
What happened? What did he say?
He was just like, that makes so much sense. Like,
but no sense whatsoever at the same time.
That's hilarious. I got to remember that next time I meet someone that everyone else knows and I don't.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week, Noah. It's been a blast. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, you should give us a review on Apple Podcasts. We will see you next week.